Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is May 2nd, 2018. Hello from downtown Denver, where I am putting this episode together 2 days early on Wednesday, May 2nd, for release on the usual Friday. That's because tomorrow Darlene and I and the Yorkie Claire will fly to Omaha for the graduation of our nephew Stephen Detterman. He's an Army reservist who will graduate from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. A big family celebration will ensue. My guest for this week's episode is Séamus Bellamy, a journalist who lives in a 40-foot motorhome that enables seasonal migrations for him and his wife between Alberta, Canada, and Texas. Along the way, he covers, among other things, the topic of e-readers. So I had fun accompanying him deep into the weeds of the Kindle platform. Also, we talked about Kobo. One surprising revelation was his reaction to one of my favorite features, X-Ray.
I very rarely use it. I kind of look, all right, let's see what this is about. And I think it kind of takes away from the immersion of reading, to be honest.
Also this week, I will take a close look at a revealing interview Jeff Bezos gave this week in Berlin. For the tech tip, I will introduce you to Google's new tool for searching books. And in content, we'll take a quick look at a new way Amazon has created for keeping a steady supply of books coming to young readers. In news, I'd like to take a look and give you some listens to an intriguing 48-minute interview with Jeff Bezos. Jeff sat down in Berlin on April 24th with Mathias Dopfner, the CEO of Business Insider's parent company, Axel Springer. Amazon's founder and CEO traveled to Berlin to receive the 2018 Axel Springer Award. He is only the third recipient of this honor, following Mark Zuckerberg, 7 o'clock here in Denver, by Grandpa Skelton's clock. I always enjoy thinking that clock has been keeping pretty good time for over 100 years, since my great-grandfather used it first in Lewiston, Maine. But then you've got to consider Jeff Bezos and his 10,000-year clock that he's built in a mountain in Texas. In any event, the others who have received this award before Bezos were Mark Zuckerberg. That's no doubt well before Facebook's recent privacy breaches made that company one that isn't going to be getting any awards for a while, probably. And then the first recipient was Sir Timothy Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web. His reputation's pretty secure, I think. Bezos sat comfortably on a stage before 100 guests and fielded questions that were by turns friendly and challenging. As with anyone who speaks in public as often as Jeff does, there were many stories we've heard before about his grandfather's admonition that it's more difficult to be kind than to be clever, how Amazon focuses on customers, not competitors, how inventors must be willing to be misunderstood, and why it matters to Bezos that he has few regrets when he reaches the age of 80. You'll find a full video and transcript of the conversation at the show notes to this episode at thekindlechronicles.com. The interview has already generated quite a bit of news coverage, particularly on a point Jeff made toward the end about the term work-life balance.
And my view is that's a debilitating phrase because it implies there's a strict trade-off. And the reality is if I'm happy at home, I come into the office with tremendous energy. And if I'm happy at work, I come home with tremendous energy. And so it actually is a circle. It's not a balance. And I think that is worth everybody paying attention to. You never want to be that guy. And we all have a coworker who is that person who, as soon as they come into the meeting, they drain all of the energy out of the room. You can just feel the energy level go. You don't want to be that guy.
Other newsworthy portions of the interview, I thought, revealed the Amazon CEO's surprising equanimity on the subject of whether his company might be split up into parts by regulators, his readiness to defend the Washington Post against any attack on its freedom to cover the news, why he will never interfere with the Post coverage of Amazon, and which is more important to him, Amazon or his Blue Origin aerospace startup. Since I hope to interview Jeff Bezos again in 2020 following my conversations with him in Seattle in 2012 and 2016, I'm always on the lookout for clues on how to best conduct a worthwhile conversation with him. Mathias Dopfner made a couple of mistakes that I don't plan to repeat, and I'll tell you about those. I shared with you a couple of weeks ago how Amazon's Senior Vice President for Public Affairs, Jay Carney, handled his old friend David Axelrod's jabs at Amazon's size and growing power to disrupt. In Berlin, the questions were even more pointed.
Your most prominent critic at the moment is the President of the United States. People are even saying that he may be willing to prepare initiatives to break up Amazon because it's too big, it's too successful, it's too dominant in too many sectors, or for very other reasons. First of all, is this scenario of a breakup something that you take seriously, or you think it's just a fantasy?
For me, again, this is one of those things where, I focus on and ask our teams to focus on what we can control. And I expect, whether it's, the current U.S. administration or any other government agency anywhere in the world, Amazon is now a large corporation, and I expect us to be scrutinized. We should be scrutinized. I think all large institutions should be scrutinized and examined. It's reasonable. And one thing to note about us is that we have gotten big in absolute terms only very recently. So we've always been growing fast in percentage terms. But in 2010, just 8 years ago, we had 30,000 employees. So in the last 8 years, we've gone from 30,000 employees to 560,000 employees. For us, it's kind of, in my mind, I'm still delivering the packages to the post office myself. You see what I'm saying? I still have all the memories of, hoping that one day we could afford a forklift. And so obviously that's my intellectual brain knows that's just not the case anymore. We have 560,000 employees all over the world. And I know we should be scrutinized, and I think it's true. Big government institutions should be scrutinized. Big nonprofit institutions should be scrutinized. Big universities should be scrutinized. It just makes sense.
Dopfner followed up with a suggestion that public sentiment seems to be changing against the big tech companies, including Amazon, George Soros, The Economist, the EU, and he was asking what Amazon should learn and do about this change in sentiment.
If you look at the big tech companies, they have gotten large enough that they're going to be inspected. And by the way, it's not personal. I think where you can go astray on this if you're the founder of a company, one of these big tech companies or any other big institution. If you go astray on this, you might start to take it personally. Like, why are you inspecting me? I think that I wish that people would just say yes. It's fine.
Next was a bit of news about whether Jeff Bezos might be in the market to buy newspapers other than the Washington Post. Here's what he said.
I get that request monthly.
Yeah,
I really do. I tell them the Post is it for me. I'm not interested in buying other newspapers.
That's not because he isn't committed to the Post. It was clear when he said that he had watched Steven Spielberg's movie starring Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks twice, and then he went on to reveal how deep his readiness for a fight to defend the Post is going in terms of how he's possibly preparing for one.
I watched that movie, and it's helpful. I love that movie, and also reading Katharine Graham's memoir, which won a Pulitzer Prize and is an amazing book, because it gets me ready. I as the owner of the Post, I know that at times the Post is going to write stories that are going to make very powerful people very unhappy.
I've wondered lately whether Bezos has ever been tempted to interfere or at least give a comment or two on the Post coverage of Amazon. A good example of how tough the paper he owns can be on the company that generates his personal fortune was coverage of Amazon's recently announced $20 increase in the annual price of Prime membership. A story on April 27th was headlined "How to Get Around Amazon Prime's New $119 Fee," and among the suggestions was number 6, shop somewhere somewhere else instead. Specifically, Bezos' newspaper recommended trying Walmart and Target because they now offer free 2-day shipping on orders over $35. So I was glad to hear the sort of un-CEO-like terms that Bezos used in describing why he doesn't ever want to meddle in the post coverage of Amazon. I'm convinced it's not likely in the least that it will ever happen. His face actually took on kind of a pained expression when he talked about even the suggestion that he would ever find himself weighing in the newsroom.
I would be humiliated to interfere. I would be so embarrassed. I would turn bright red, and it has nothing to do with, I don't even get so far, I just don't want to. For me, it would feel icky. It would feel gross. It would be one of those things when I'm 80 years old, I would be so unhappy with myself if I interfered. Why would I?
Over the years, Bezos has become increasingly forthright about how he looks at Amazon and his aerospace startup Blue Origin. We've heard him say that Amazon has been like winning the lottery for him and that he's pleased to use the proceeds for helping mankind move into space before we run out of room on Earth. This week he stated it as clearly as I've ever heard it, and he also came prepared with some facts, hoping to generate some support for his really breathtaking and very long-term vision.
I believe on the longest time frame, and I really here I'm thinking of a time frame of a couple hundred years. So over many decades, I believe, and I get increasing conviction with this with every passing year, the Blue Origin, the space company, is the most important work I'm doing. And so there is a whole plan for Blue Origin.
So you'd say retail, online e-commerce, publishing, that's all less relevant than the space project.
And I'll tell you why. And so first of all, of course, I'm interested in space because I'm passionate about it and I've been studying it and thinking about it since I'm a 5-year-old boy. But that is not why I'm pursuing this work. I'm pursuing this work because I believe if we don't, we will eventually end up with a civilization of stasis, which I find very demoralizing. I don't want my great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren to live in a civilization of stasis.
As for what I learned about interviewing Jeff Bezos, one is never to interrupt him when he is praising his wife, the award-winning author Mackenzie Bezos, who, it turns out, stepped way out of her writerly comfort zone to handle Amazon's accounting for the first year of operation. I'd never heard that story before. As he continued talking about his wife, who was in the audience, Dopfner tried to interject another question, and that led Bezos to he was a pretty mild-mannered guest, but in this case, he simply talked over his host until he'd finished his story about his wife's prowess as an author.
My wife is a novelist. She's won the American Book Award. Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize-winning author, who was Mackenzie's teacher at Princeton.
So did she suggest then to do a bookstore?
Said on the Charlie Rose show that Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize winner, said about that Mackenzie was her best student ever.
Another thing I learned from Dopfner was to not alter a question or pose a new one until Jeff is finished answering the first one. I noticed a couple of times how Bezos seemed to circle back to an original question despite tangents offered by his host, as if he'd formed a complete plan for an answer on hearing the question, and he was pretty committed to follow that plan to its conclusion. Those two quibbles aside, I was very impressed with the depth and breadth of this interview and recommend it highly. I'd also love to hear your reactions if you take the time to listen to it or read the transcript. You can send me your thoughts at podchronicles@gmail.com. For this week's tech tip, I want to tell you about a new tool that Google unveiled this month on April 15th called Talk to Books. I first learned about it at Bradley Metrock's excellent Digital Book World blog. That's at digitalbookworld.com. And that, by the way, is where you can register for the all-new Digital Book World Conference, which Bradley's company purchased and is moving to Nashville. I will be there October 2nd through 4th, and it looks like a terrific program is being prepared. Bradley stated in his post that Google Talk to Books, this was in the headline, quote, might just have changed everything in our ability to search for information in books. Here's how it works. You point your browser to books.google.com/talktobooks and you type in a question. For example, I just entered, how can I increase the audience for my podcast? In a moment or two, 5 quotes appear from 5 different books with a pertinent sentence emphasized in bold type. They come from books that are about podcasting, and so that just it's a point or two actual books. And then if I drill down and find the page where the particular quote shows up, bold, there's some pertinent information there. Talk to Books uses artificial intelligence to fetch answers to your question in the books. The model looks at every sentence in more than 100,000 books to find the responses that would most likely come next if you had just asked this kind of a question in a normal conversation. Google says Talk to Books is a more creative tool than a way to find specific answers. It's not like Google search. It's a powerful new way to navigate on the internet toward things that maybe you didn't know you needed to know yet. If you haven't tried it, I think you'll enjoy checking it out. The easiest way to find it is simply to Google Talk to Books. It'll show up the first thing. Time now for the interview. Journalist and blogger Séamus Bellamy lives in a 40-foot diesel motorhome with his wife and dog, and they migrate north to south with the seasons between the Canadian province of Alberta and the Texas coast. E-readers are a particular area of interest among a wide variety of subjects that Séamus covers in publications that include PC World, Boing Boing, Fast Company, The Globe and Mail, and Tech Hive. I caught up with him Tuesday, May 1st via Skype and a pretty good cell phone connection. His motorhome was parked on Crown Land, that's public area about 30 minutes outside of a town named Nordig on the border of Banff National Park. Beautiful place. Although we connected in the same time zone, my views of downtown Denver couldn't have been more different than his views of trees and the Canadian Rockies. We spent a while comparing views and comparing notes on Kindles, and I'll pick up the conversation where I asked him if he prefers the new, larger 7-inch Oasis screen to the one that was originally introduced in 2016.
Well, I actually prefer it for a lot of the reading that I do. So for magazines, periodicals, technical manuals, like say if I want to read up on an Adobe guidebook for using one of their programs, it's really good for that. Just because with a smaller screen, I found that you're having to kind of scroll through the images that would be a part of the document, and it wasn't really great scrolling, kind of janky in the way that e-readers can be with photographs. I like it for that. On the other hand, you lose that portability that you get with the smaller displays, which I think is kind of nice to have for, like just being able to pull out an e-reader out of your suit jacket pocket, depending on the size of your suit jacket pockets, I suppose, or, just having it there with you. The larger devices aren't great for that. I'd say that if I'm sitting at home and I want something to read for a long reading period, I prefer the larger devices. That said, I found that the size of the Kindle's display, the new Oasis, it's not great for comic books. It's not great for graphic novels and stuff like that. It's just a little bit too small to really enjoy, I think. I still find myself having to either size the page properly or to go frame by frame if I bought something off of Amazon or if I have a book that I've imported from Comixology, for example. For reading of graphic material, I prefer the Aura 1, to be honest.
Do you also have a Fire tablet or other tablet that you use for reading Comixology titles?
I have an iPad Pro that I use, the 9.7-inch model, and that's generally where I'll end up reading with it, but it's just convenient of having the e-reader with me all the time. There's always one in my bag. I can't say that for the iPad. It's nice to have it, just to be able to have the option.
Yeah.
That and the fact that for Comixology titles, some of them are copy protected, so you can't sideload them onto an e-reader. It only works within the app, which, kind of disappointing, but I'm hoping since Amazon owns the company, they'll be able to sort of move things over soon.
Mm-hmm. How about the basic Kindle? It's obviously less expensive. What are you giving up if you go for the basic Kindle compared to the Paperwhite?
I'm not really a big fan of the basic Kindle simply because for just a few dollars more, like $40, $50 more, you can get a Paperwhite and it's going to serve you much better. It's a faster read. It's better. It's got backlighting for that matter. I find that it's just I think the basic Kindle last time I looked at it would have been last year, and it was selling, I believe, for $79. Mm-hmm. I'd rather pay another, $40 and have something that's going to serve me in the dark. It's going to be easy to read on the beach. It's a little bit faster as far as it goes, and it feels better in the hand, to be honest. I prefer the feeling of the device as well, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't consider when they're buying something like a Kindle or an iPad is, it can be thin, it can be, like the weight might look similar to other devices, but really until you pick it up, it's hard to tell whether you're going to enjoy holding on to it for a long time. I think that Amazon's nailed that with the Paperwhite.
Do you use covers on your Kindles?
I do, actually. I'm kind of danger prone, so I prefer having the cover on. Basically, every Paperwhite that I've owned has had a cover on it since, anytime I take it out. And because I generally go with the Amazon covers, it's a real pain to take out of it, so it stays in there.
Yeah.
With the Oasis devices, on the other hand, the covers are designed to come off easily, and I shed those whenever I sit down to read for a while, put them back on when I'm done.
I like the latest version of the Oasis. The cover serves as a stand, so if I'm at a coffee shop, it's kind of nice to just be able to set it up and read that way.
Absolutely. I found the I like the leather one, the suede. It's my favorite to use, but I've also got one of the faux-looking book covers, the kind of textured fabric. It's more waterproof, so you can take it with you in the pool or whatever have you. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to use that for a while, and it does the trick with the stand as well, but I find that the magnets on it don't work as well as the suede covers do. So you can stand it up, but any jostling on the table, it has a chance of kind of popping off, so it makes me distrust it.
Yeah. How do you feel about special offers? Is that worth the $20 savings in cost to you or not?
Oh, it's for me, absolutely. I despise the idea of people serving me up content that I don't want to look at. Unfortunately, while I'm reviewing devices, I have to keep things like that turned on to be able to sort of see how intrusive it really is. But for my own devices, I always go and purchase the little bit of extra premium sort of service that you get and have that turned off.
Yeah. I've noticed that over the years, it seemed like the special offers, sometimes they were for non-book items, sometimes they were for baby diapers and things I just wasn't interested in. But now it seems like 99% of the offers that show up are actually books, which makes me a little less resistant because every once in a while I think I saw a Churchill biography series that showed up once and I actually bought it. So a little bit of fear of missing out if I were to take that off my Kindle.
I've actually never found anything in the special offers I wanted to buy. And part of that was probably because, as you say, for a long time there, you get some stuff other than, just Kindle products. Because of the fact that I review a lot of different things depending on who I'm working for. I spend a lot of time on Amazon comparing specs, looking at reviews and stuff like that. So my queue of special offers was really diverse. Stuff that I didn't want to see again. It would be popping up all the time. But, I could see that some readers would really enjoy that, especially if, you're used to browsing in a bookstore and, just kind of happening upon something that delights you. And you don't get that experience as easily, through the Kindle bookstore itself. Over time, I suppose, it kind of builds up, and finds out what it is that you'd like to read. But, for the most part, for someone that's just gotten their first e-reader that, maybe wants to switch over to ebooks, it's hard to really find titles, I think.
Yeah. I've had some listeners tell me that they called tech support for Amazon and said, I don't like the special offers. Can you take it off without paying the $20? And that, I think a handful of people have told me separately that the response was, sure, we'll take it off, and you don't have to pay the $20 to take it off.
Well, that's amazing. I've never heard of that. Is that recent? Or
within the last 6 months, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've had pretty good experiences with Amazon's tech support. One of the biggest frustrations I've got with their content management for the company is the fact that some things will work on a Fire tablet and some things will work on your Kindle. Unfortunately, it doesn't always say what those are. So, for example, I've got a subscription to Wired, and I thought, great, I could read this on my Oasis just like I would the other magazines that I subscribe to. It wasn't the case. It turned out that you can only read it on the Fire tablet. I think it might be because it's each magazine per month is actually an import from what they do for iOS. So it looks like, it just kind of shoot it over to Android and good enough. So I called up Amazon and explained the problem. They reversed the charges. No problem there at all.
Well, now, is that something that you would buy through the Kindle store? So it shows up as a newsstand item on the Fire and yet it still wasn't readable on the Kindle?
In my case, I ordered it on my computer, so there might have been something there saying that, this will only work on the tablet, but if there was, I didn't see it there.
Yeah.
So I sat down to try and download it, and it was nowhere to be seen. And it's weird. If you go into the Kindle store on your e-reader, it'll show up. If you type in Wired, for example, it shows they've got the UK version of it. They've got the German version of it, but the American version doesn't come up.
Oh, interesting. That could be partly related to the tricky graphics that Wired has always prided itself on. Sometimes that might just be.
I think so.
The algorithm might really have a hernia trying to get that onto a Kindle.
Well, I'm kind of curious about it, but not curious enough to subscribe to one of those other versions of Wired to see what the differences would be and why it's in there, and it's not the American version isn't available. Because they're all owned by Condé Nast. I'd like to imagine that they'd have the same sort of standards for like graphics and such being across the line. But yeah, I couldn't tell you what it would be, but it's a good theory.
Yeah, interesting. Well, now, I've had a couple of Kobos, and I've always sort of enjoyed that there was an alternative to the Kindle. Is there anything you can say in comparing the Kobo platform to the Kindle platform separate from the devices themselves? What do you get if you go with one or the other?
To be honest, I really like what Kobo's got going on for it as far as platform goes. The only reason that I myself wouldn't really go and buy one for use for day-to-day use is because of the fact I already own so much Amazon content. I mean, you can work with using Calibre and plugins to strip the DRM out, but for most people that's kind of a pain. It's not strictly legal to do it, and so it's if you want to be able to read Amazon content, the easiest way to do that is to have an Amazon device. Having used it as my first, sort of e-reader, I've got going back 8 years of content. I've got, hundreds of books at this point.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to be able to read it on Kindle because of what they've got. But I find, number one, Kobo Store isn't quite as expansive as Amazon is. They're getting better. If you're to look for top 100 books, chances are you're going to find them. But more obscure titles, more academic titles, they seem to be lacking in that. Comic books as well, it's not that great. Periodicals, sometimes it's hard to find that stuff too. But what they've got going for them are a couple of special features that I really wish Amazon had. The first is Kobos have really excellent integration with Pocket. If you're familiar with Instapaper, it's a much more refined, much better interface than what you find with, say, on Amazon. For Instapaper being sort of ported into your system. It's a separate app. It's really smooth to use. It's enjoyable to read. I really like using it. The other thing they've got is they have access to Overdrive, which allows you to use library books on your Kobo anytime you want to. And the setup process is stupid easy. All you have to do is enter in your library card for a given library that you belong to, and you've got access to all their e-publications. It's really nice, and for the buying power and for the money that Amazon has, I wish that they'd invest in technology like that because it really makes for a better reading experience. If you're not interested in reading a book, you've been collecting information all week online, you see a story, you just click, it goes to Pocket, and it shows up in your e-reader. It's lovely.
Yeah. Now, Overdrive is now owned by the same company that owns Kobo. I wonder if that would be a barrier for Amazon getting a similar Overdrive capability on the Kindle.
I think that'd be a great way to go. It's not everybody has money to buy books on a regular basis, and for some books you may not want to own them. So Amazon certainly offers samples, but let's say you need a text for research purposes. Say you're a student and you want to just be able to borrow this book for a week, 2 weeks, whatever have you. Overdrive's awesome for that.
Yeah, and
that's something I think that they're really lacking in for Kindle right now. Is that they've got the edge on hardware. Just looking at the new Oasis versus flagship from Kobo, the Aura 1, the Aura 1 feels cheap this year compared to what Amazon's got going with the Kindle Oasis. It's plastic. It's kind of flimsy by comparison. It feels very much like an older model, which it is, and they're not able to compete on the hardware front, but they're killing Amazon with the software. It's an easier overall UI to use as well, in my opinion.
One thing I love about the Kindle is, X-ray I like a lot, and highlights and annotations, and how easy it is now to get my annotations on the web. How is Kobo in that department? If you're sort of actively reading and you want to have a handy way to fetch and print out stuff that you've read, can you do that on Kobo as well?
You can, but it's not as eloquent and easy to find as it is on Amazon. Like, where you just come up with my clippings and boom, there it is on your device, and also being able to get them online and print it out. That's one area that admittedly, Amazon's definitely got the edge there. But at the same time, I'm not sure if that really equates to what Kobo's got going on for most people. I know that the people I talk to, they're not, and I ask people on a regular basis what features you use, because as a reviewer, I don't like to just sort of assume that, what I know is best. I like to be able to ask someone that really doesn't deal with technology that much. Just, it's a part of their daily lives, and that's it. That's what they like to do. And a lot of people I know, they don't really use clippings. They don't really annotate as they go.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I look for as, like a major feature set. I think that clippings and such is more for people that, they're looking at books and such more academically. They want to talk about books as opposed to just reading the books. They want to, remember something that they read, and they plop it down into their clipping section.
Yeah, good point. How about X-ray? Do you run across people that seem to be using that?
To be honest, I haven't met one person outside of tech nerds like myself that use it. I very rarely use it. I kind of look, all right, let's see what this is about. And I think it kind of takes away from the immersion of reading, to be honest.
Yeah.
If I'm interested in something, I'll take a look at it later on. But like during the reading process, I don't really want to leave. I feel the same way about footnotes in ebooks. Actually, that kind of takes you away from the page, and maybe you can get back to where you're reading. Maybe you won't, depending on how you navigate it there. I'm not sure that it's really something I want for while I'm reading a book.
My wife feels that way. Whenever I'm going to do her a good deed and teach her how to use annotations and X-ray.
Yeah.
It's not that she's even bored to hear about it. She resents that I would try to mess up her pure reading experience. So you're helping me to understand her.
Yeah. Films with commentary are the same for me. If I want to watch the movie and I want to enjoy the movie, and I don't want to hear somebody talking over it while I'm trying to take it in. It just doesn't work for me as a viewer.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Kobo was owned by a Canadian company, and then in 2011, the Japanese media giant Rakuten purchased it. Have you noticed anything under the new owner that has pluses or minuses for Kobo and as a result of that acquisition?
I think that on the whole, they're actually they're working to unify their design language of the readers. If you look at the pre-purchase Kobos, it was kind of all over the place. It just, here's one of our readers. It looks nothing like one of our other readers. That was, it's not really a problem, but for brand recognition, it's a problem for that. I think that the design on the whole, because of this, is actually getting better for their hardware at this point. When I look at the second version of the Kobo or H2O compared to the first one, there's no comparison. It's a much more sleeker looking model. It resembles their flagship, the Aura 1. It really feels like it's from the same company. Whereas, at the time that the original H2O was released, every model had these little differences that really, it kind of separated the lineup. You really didn't see anything that really drew it together other than the fact that it's Kobo, and that was it. I think that they're also really trying to draw on readers by not just going and giving them original ideas, like, here's some Pocket integration, and it's a great app, or here's Overdrive, which we own as well. They're also trying to refine the UI. They're working to work out bugs, and I think that's something that really started happening after the acquisition took place.
Kobo doesn't have much of a market share in the U.S., I don't think. Is it a stronger presence in Canada, perhaps because it started out as part of a Canadian company?
Well, it's a stronger presence here in Canada because of the fact that you can buy them in stores here locally. At any Chapters Indigo bookstore, which is our version of Barnes & Noble, you walk in and there's a display of Kobo devices there. We don't have an equivalent for that for Amazon hardware at this point. I remember back when I was at CES a few years back, walked into a Best Buy and there were all these Amazon Kindles laid out. And I was like, why don't they do this up north? And they just don't have that representation.
Yeah.
So I think that you'll see more Kobos here around than you normally would, stay down in the States. From what I understand, they're very big in Europe right now. So I'm not sure what that is compared to Amazon's market share over there, but it's substantial.
Yeah. It's pretty clear that the share of reading devices, e-ink versus tablets and especially phones, that there's sort of a shrinking footprint for the e-ink dedicated readers. Do you expect that to continue? What's happening there in terms of trends?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't speak as far as trends go because it's not something that I research on a regular basis. I prefer reading on an e-reader as opposed to a tablet. With a tablet, you don't just have your books there. You've got notifications from friends, you've got apps, you've got emails coming in, and you don't really get to just enjoy a book. Also, because of the reflective displays that come with tablets, it's hard to see outside. It's lousy for reading at night. They're too bright to let you read while your partner's sleeping. There's studies back and forth saying that the blue spectrum light that they cast off will keep you awake. Whether you believe in that or not, subscribe to it. there's so many drawbacks to being able to read on a tablet for book reading, periodical reading, that I still don't see e-readers leaving right away. Mm-hmm. That said, I know that a lot of people have shrinking attention spans these days because of the bites of news that we get from Twitter, the sort of packets of information from Facebook that we have, the things that we're served up on a daily basis in the media. They're not long reads, generally speaking. So I think that maybe the market share for people that are reading books right now, it could be shrinking, and it may change even worse, things for the worse for e-readers. It may change things for the worse for publishers. But I don't see the devices going away anytime soon. I mean, I'm looking at things like, say, the Remarkable tablet. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's an e-ink tablet that you can write on. It feels just like paper. I've got one here. It's a lousy e-reading experience for right now. But I think that showing that e-readers can do a little bit more than, say, what current Oasis can do, where you use it for taking notes, where you can use it to read, and you can go back and underline PDFs and work with documents that way, and then sync those to a tablet or to a phone afterwards. I think that might be where the future is for these devices, as the displays become a little bit more responsive. The refresh rates are much faster. I think that we're going to probably find that e-readers, e-ink devices are going to become peripheral devices to tablets and phones more often than not. Just being able to give that extra bit of value.
That Remarkable tablet did interest me. I think I ordered one and I canceled it because it's a little bit pricey. But when you switch your stuff from that tablet, say, to something you can print off of, is that Bluetooth or do you have to attach it with a wire?
Oh, it's actually an app that you have to use. So they have an app. It's basically you connect your Remarkable tablet has a particular PIN number that you feed into this app on your computer or on your smartphone. And when you connect the Remarkable to Wi-Fi, it'll upload that stuff and it shows up in the app. Kind of think of it sort of like a specialized Evernote.
Yeah, I see.
Recently, they made it so you can actually also export them as PDFs as well. So any of the work that you've done, say handwriting, whatever else, you can also save it on your computer as a PDF, which is nice.
And when you write on it with a stylus, is the action instantaneous, or is there a bit of a lag?
It's actually pretty spectacular. It's instantaneous, and it feels good. It feels like writing on paper. Over the last few months, I've been taking mine. They just did a software update that's made it a little bit more useful, the ability to be able to take PDFs and sort of drop them onto your computer as opposed to having them live in the app. They've made that a lot easier to do, and so it's become something that I want to try and integrate more into my workflow. I've been taking it to events. I've been taking it on junkets. I find that for writing notes, it's really, really nice, more so than paper because you don't have it's a stable platform. It's not going to bend like paper, but writing on it feels exactly like paper.
Could replace the reporter's notebook.
I actually kind of wish that they had a smaller version of it. It's a little bit large to be able to use on a regular basis for for a memo book or something like that. Yeah. But for what it does, it's pretty impressive. I almost said pretty remarkable, but it seems kind of cliched. So we're moving away from that.
When I thought it was too expensive to keep my order going, I thought maybe it was up over $400 or so. Let's see.
I believe it was around $600. I got in as an early bird, so there was that. And it's not a cheap device.
After talking with Séamus, I checked the Remarkable price. You can find it at remarkable.com. And they've actually got a sale going on until May 9th. The usual price is $599 for the tablet, and it's now available for $499.
I know that it's on par with Sony has a device that could do similar stuff, an e-ink device that allows you to annotate documents, PDFs, and that sort of thing. And it's around the same price as that guy is. I think what they're aiming at is a more specialized market to creative professionals, lawyers, and such, people that work with documents and document creation on a regular basis. E-reading is kind of an extra perk, but for the time being, you can only import EPUB format files, and there's not a lot of those floating around in my library, so it doesn't really have any usefulness in that area for me. And I don't think that, the fact that it costs so much, EPUB, you might have a few lying around, you might not. They have to be with no DRM, so that's another complication you've got there. There's no backlighting on it at this point. So for most people buying an e-reader, it might be not really worth it to them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's finish up. You're there living in your motor home in great places in North America, where is most of your journalism showing up that people could follow it online these days?
Well, I work a lot for Review.com. It's USA's tech silo, and I do a lot of travel hardware for them. So suitcases, things to use while you're in the air, travels and security tips. I do that sort of thing for them. I write on a regular basis for Boeing. I'm a blogger for that site on a daily basis. I also work as a headphone reviewer for Macworld, and PC World, of course, is where most of my e-reader reviews show up.
I see. Great. Boeing is a fascinating site. That's Cory Doctorow. Was he the founder of it?
He's one of them, yes. It was a group of people that started a e-zine back in the mid-'90s, and they stayed together, and it grew from being just a place where they could talk of a bulletin board and such. It grew into a website.
How do you decide when something is going to be a Boing post?
The general rule for me is that it has to be something that I want to talk to my friends about. There's a lot of news out there. Some of it's depressing, some of it's insane, and it's got to be something that I would want to be able to discuss and say, "Hey, did you see this story that I came across?" And that's very much how I write. Is I try to think of it as trying to write for my friends, and it's a step away from what I do as a tech reviewer, where I have to kind of detach myself from it and look at it objectively. I'm allowed to become a little bit more involved with the posts at Boing and have some fun.
Terrific. Anything else you'd like to mention that we didn't get to talk about?
I am going to be working on a usage and hacks series for e-readers for PC World. We're just kind of getting that together right now. Just thought of it. We were just talking about it last week. Kind of broached the topic of how to more effectively use your e-readers. So we're going to be doing that for PC World in the near future. There's not a lot of details yet, so I can't give you any, but it is coming.
Will it be like a column that people would find eventually, or?
It's going to be a series of stories just on, how to, say, for example, sideload books. Not everybody would necessarily know how to do that. If you wanted to remove DRM from some of your pieces, we might talk about that. It's going to be tips that, you might not necessarily know from reading Amazon's manual that comes with the device. Yeah.
That'd be great. Well, let me know when that's up, and I'll pass it along to the listeners. I'm sure they'd be interested in it. I have been speaking with journalist and e-reader reviewer Séamus Bellamy. Thanks very much, Séamus.
My pleasure.
In content, you might want to check out Amazon's new Prime Book Box for Kids program. I'll have a link in it to the show notes at thekindlechronicles.com. It's available by invitation only, and you have to be a Prime member to request an invitation. Prime Book Box is a subscription that delivers hand-picked children's books every 1, 2, or 3 months. You save up to 35% off the list price of the books, and you can tailor the box by 4 age levels: baby to 2 years old, ages 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. You enter some preferences in content, kinds of things you think the kids might want to read, and then Amazon's book editors are the ones who choose the books. You can preview the list and select, or you can let the boxes of books just arrive and be a surprise to everybody. That might be kind of fun. They've got a cute ad showing kids going nuts as these books arrive. I love nothing better than to read to my youngest grandsons in Cambridge. Jake and Ryan are 4 and 2, and my daughter and her husband have instilled in them a true love of reading, or at least at this point being read to. I want to share a comment that I heard from Dave. Len, by now you've probably heard this, but they do have visiting hours at the Spheres. That came up in last week's conversation with Brett McNeil. When he was there was just some kind of a little viewing area, but apparently there is a way to apply for a pass to actually go in and go through the Spheres, so that'd be pretty interesting. You'll find a link in the show notes. I will release next week's show earlier than usual on Wednesday instead of Friday in order to coincide with the publication of what I think is an important new book titled Our Towns, a 100,000-mile journey into the heart of America by James Fallows and Deborah Fallows. Next week in the interview, you are going to hear from the authors who, over the course of 5 years, flew their small plane all over the country, gathering stories in small cities and towns, generally out of the view of the national media. The author of 11 previous books, Jim is a pilot and has been a national correspondent for The Atlantic for more than 35 years. Deb, his wife, is a linguist and writer who holds a PhD in theoretical linguistics. I first met Jim and Deb before they were married when we all three worked on the Harvard Crimson newspaper more than 45 years ago. I'm very excited to have them on the podcast. Their book, which costs $14.99 on Kindle and $26.06 in hardcover, is available for pre-order now from Pantheon, an imprint of Penguin Random House. They also, I see, have narrated a version of the book that is available for $1 or $30.63 on Audible, an audiobook. They write alternating chapters, so I think that'd be a nice way to hear both their voices on the audiobook. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from downtown Denver. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.